There are times to stay put, and what you want will come to you. And there are times to go out into the world and find such a thing for yourself. Lemony Snicket. Bending, Not Breaking. The live action episodes. Episode 5, Spirited Away. And welcome back to another episode of Bending Not Breaking. I am Sunshine.
I'm Ben.
And we are here talking more live action Avatar episodes.
Second half of the season.
We're already done.
That's
no
right.
20 episode seasons for us this time.
Only 8.
Only 8.
But they have 3 episodes in each one because they're an hour long, which means it's 8 times 3, which is actually 24, which means it's actually a 24 season episode.
Then why does it feel so
season.
rushed?
Then good interesting question.
So why does it feel so rushed?
Yeah. I don't know what I was seeking when I started watching this, but I have realized that I haven't found it.
Interesting.
Yeah. Yeah.
It is
interesting, though.
What are you looking for when you watch?
Can't always find what you're looking for. What?
What are you looking for when you watch the show?
I think that's an interesting question, actually, because, because I have so much context for the original, I find often that I am looking for the original. And that's not what it is.
It's not the original.
It's not the original.
It's not meant to be.
It's an adaptation.
It's an adaptation.
Right, of the original. And so, but what that leaves me is if I have the expectation of finding the original, I find that I become disappointed. Or I find that ooh, that's a neat inclusion. I like how they did that. Mm-hmm. That's a neat adaptation. That's a neat fix or way to get around not being able to have that much content. There's a few things that show up in this episode that are you might call it fan service, but Pippin Patalopsicopoulos III shows up, and Sokka is talking about it. Sokka, it rhymes with Akka. There's a lot of one-liners that come that are hints at episodes that aren't actually showing up.
Yeah.
But those quotes are there, and so when honestly, but I'm not necessarily looking for them, and that's when they feel good, is when I'm not looking for it and it comes up, I'm like, oh, neat. But when I am looking for it and it doesn't show up, I'm like, oh, no. So, I don't know. It seems like seeking has something to do with expectation.
Yeah.
Or colors expectation, maybe. I don't know. But we're talking about seeking, if you haven't figured it out yet.
Yeah.
Seeking is our lens today.
The attempt or desire to obtain or achieve something.
Ooh. Really?
Yeah.
Obtain or achieve.
Attempt or desire to obtain or achieve something.
I don't know that is... That's an interesting way to phrase that. Huh. I would have...
Thanks, Google.
Still haven't found what I'm looking for. Yeah, I don't know. I didn't think about it as obtaining something. That's interesting. I guess when you're
seeking
it.
The game's called hide and seek.
But you're just trying to find them. You're not trying to obtain the person. You're just trying to find them. You got to tag them.
You're seeking the Holy Grail.
Yeah, I guess you are trying to obtain that.
Yeah,
give me it.
Yep.
Metaphorically speaking, are you really trying to obtain it if it's a metaphorical object?
I don't know.
Anyway, we're talking about Spirited Away, the 5th episode of NATLA, and we're talking about seeking in the episode, and all the things are happening in terms of seeking, but in order to remind you of what happened, or in case you haven't watched it, we're going to give you a quick 30-second recap. And by we, I mean Sunshine.
Nope, wrong.
Yes.
No, it's your turn.
That's why you have your phone out. You have your notes.
I'm timing you.
No,
That's
don't
what it
you
is.
pretend
On
otherwise.
your mark, get set, go.
There's a dope fight, and then the forest burned down, and then the spirit world is pink and blurry, and then Zuko is hunting the Avatar, and then there's June, and then Gyatso's in the spirit world and guiding Aang, and then there's the Fog of Lost Souls, and then there's Ko, who's eating the souls and like wanting the people to feel despair, and then Katara remembers her worst memory, and Mom is burned alive, and then Sokka's worst memory is hearing his father's disapproval about his mistakes.
5
and then
seconds.
Aang leaves the spirit world to head to see your boy Roku in the Fire Nation, and that's where we end today.
Yeah, 30 seconds.
Nailed it.
Little over, but like 30 seconds.
But like 0.57 over.
Yeah.
That's just you just didn't press the button in time.
Sure. Was it a dope fight? That's what you started with.
That initial scene?
I didn't like it.
What didn't you like about it?
I didn't think it looked good. I don't think majority of the show looks good.
I kind of liked it.
I think like it is very clearly the green screen elements do not meld well with like when they're performing in front of it.
What was the green screen part?
Almost all of it. Almost in the entirety. Like there's some like dedicated sets like when they first get to the town near the forest.
That fight
like,
doesn't
all that
seem
stuff.
like green screen.
Yeah, it does. That I did not
that was
love.
Like in a forest.
The whole like ice thing did look clunky to me. I didn't like it.
Really?
Yeah.
Huh. I kind of liked it.
Let's see. Well, look at that. Different strokes.
Yeah. For different folks.
I think I try to be very objective right now.
Uh-huh.
But I'm losing
the objectivity,
the grace that I have with each episode.
Yeah.
And I think it's just this show is not for me.
Sure.
But I think it was meant to be for me.
Uh-huh.
But like this episode was like a turning point to me. It felt like a chore watching this in the
This
next
was
episode.
a turning point for me episode-wise too,
Yeah.
where I was like, ooh, choices.
Like the season's starting to feel like a chore to watch.
Yeah. It's a bummer.
But and I will acknowledge it is not nearly as bad as the movie.
No.
And there are lots of people who love it. But this television show is not for me.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's I think the problem I said this earlier when Aang went into the spirit world with Kyoshi for a hot minute. I don't remember what episode that was, like episode 2, I think.
Yeah.
But like this pink blurriness that is like, it's a weird choice because it takes away from it. It brings me out of it. I know it's supposed to like take the viewer into like, oh, you're in an ethereal kind of place, but at the same time, I'm like, I don't think this is it. It feels like the blurriness takes away. I remember some of these like the web comics and in Korra and in Avatar where like the spirit world kind of shifts in Korra, where it's like feels very different than it does with Avatar.
Way more
with Aang,
vibrant,
right?
Like
Way
it's
more
like
vibrant.
Vibrant, colorful. It's
so
like this
the
world
pink,
building.
I think is this mixture of what is from that. It's like, oh well, let's bring in some of this pink instead of all this dark and gloom that we see from Aang's spirit world.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the inner turmoil that Aang is experiencing is the fan theory around why the spirit world is the way it is in the cartoon.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's different for Korra because she's just a different experience, right?
Sure.
But that aside, I think the choice to make it blurry makes it difficult to get into the feeling of it for me. But that's just me. Other people might really like it. So that and some of the choices that were made with Ko, which seemed like I see what they're trying to do with it, but it also seemed like a missed opportunity to use Ko in a way that is... It's not the way I would have liked Ko to be taken. Those are my main gripes.
Yeah. We'll get to it in Chui and Law.
Yeah.
We'll get to it in Chui and Law. Let's talk about Seeking.
Seeking, that's a Pokemon. It's the evolved form of Goldeen in the original 150 Pokemon of Generation 1 from Kanto region. Right? Isn't that Kanto or is it Johto? It's one of the. It's a region of Pokemon. All the nerds.
I never played.
Really?
Nope. Never played the games.
Stop it.
Watch the show.
It's so good.
Never played the games.
Anyway.
Pokemon Go was the only Pokemon game I played for the summer of 2016.
Yeah. Okay, Seeking.
Where I had a knee surgery, so I just incubated my eggs by driving around in my car slowly and shaking my phone.
I remember that.
Just me around the neighborhood at like 5 miles an hour, and then just like shaking the phone in my hand.
Worth it.
It worked.
Yeah.
Probably not for the environment, but
Probably not. No, but it kept you entertained on a bum knee.
Yep, that's true.
All right. In the episode, there's a lot of seeking. There's a lot of people looking for things, trying to find something, but those things are all different for different people. So, for me, the first thing that comes up is Zuko.
So sassy.
Well, he's a little sassy boy.
You mean to tell me that you saw ice where there shouldn't be any
Didn't
ice?
think it was unusual.
I was like, sassy Zuko.
Yeah.
I'm here for it.
Yeah. But, in thinking about seeking, I was thinking about, he is seeking the avatar, but the avatar is a means to an end. So sometimes it looks like you're looking for something or trying to find something or seeking something, but that's not what you're actually going after.
Right.
And so oftentimes that in communication that's often true amongst people where, oh, I really want this. And somebody's like, well, okay, here's that. But no, I didn't actually want it for that reason. I wanted it for something else. And all of a sudden you're disappointed because there was a miscommunication rather than, that person was doing their best to help you and they just didn't know what you were actually going for.
Went to an escape room recently.
Uh-huh.
And you are looking for the clue, right?
Oh, yeah, big fan.
And then when you get it in the form of a hint, it does not feel as good as finding the clue by yourself.
Interesting.
Right? That's what I pulled from your statement, right? Like this idea of sometimes what you think you want, it's not really, that's not the reason. What's the reason behind the reason? Why are we actually going after that? So Zuko, finding the avatar so I can return, right? Like, dive deeper into that.
Yeah.
Like, let's talk more about, it's not just about, I need to bring my dad the avatar.
Why do you
But,
need
like,
to bring
why
your
do you
dad
need to bring the avatar?
Yeah.
Which I think Iroh tries to, like,
Help Zuko
helps
figure out.
Zuko figure out.
Because I think even Zuko is not diving deeply into why he wants the avatar often.
Like, Zhao knows why he wants the avatar.
Yeah. He wants the promotion. He wants the prestige. Yeah.
Right. This moment where Azula goes to talk to Dad.
Yeah.
Tries to play this, like, manipulation game, and he is not having it.
He is, I am smarter than you.
Yeah, but she is seeking she's seeking validation. She's seeking,
Yeah.
I'm smart. We should totally help this guy out, and also thinks she is hiding,
Yeah.
that
she's trying to
the real
rat Zuko
intent.
out,
She's really
yeah.
trying to make sure that there's a barrier between Zuko, and Dad says, no, remember Zuko found the avatar.
Yep.
Something an heir would do.
Mm-hmm.
You're like, oh. He's
Yeah.
got daggers to throw.
Part of me likes that Ozai is pitting it. There's a little bit more understanding as to why Azula is so gung-ho about shutting Zuko down in this version versus Azula being like a true mastermind at 14. It seems like there's a little bit more Azula is a little bit more fragile and less perfect in this version, right? And I think what we see is that she is struggling with trying to be perfect in this version of her, right?
And failing.
Yeah.
Well, we're not even, if not necessarily failing, but you're just like
Well,
not.
you can't help but fail because
She is
perfectionism not
seeking for
possible.
validation
Yeah.
that she is not getting. And Ozai knows that he is not giving that validation.
Well, and it's interesting too because like the validation from Tylee and May, who are like, "Oh my God, Zula, you're perfect," doesn't fix it. Like even
It's not what she's looking
because
for.
that's not what she's looking for, right? She's looking for something else. And so oftentimes when we move towards, let me comfort you in this moment, let me make you feel better, what you're doing is not what the other person is looking for, even if you think or they think that's what they're looking
And that's
for,
the
right?
that's the question to be open when we talk about how do you implement this into leadership or anything else in your own life, which is how do you remain open for what may come through the door and be excited about that versus it's not what I was hoping for or expecting, doesn't mean it's not good. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's a good point too.
And so for her, validation from friends can be really impactful and powerful, but it's not what she wanted in that moment, and thus it doesn't hit the same as validation from the person she is looking for.
Well, it's also, and I guess we don't necessarily see this in the live action, so I don't know that this is true, but in the cartoon, we see Azula like emotionally manipulating them into giving her those kinds of answers.
Yep.
And I don't know if that's true in this version, but if it is true, it also kind of like taints the validation that she's getting from them.
If she's done that previously.
Right. If she has been like saying, you should fear me because blah 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 blah, then anything that comes from them, while it might be, transitory, like, yes, this is what I expect from you, it also doesn't scratch the itch of what she's really searching for, which is to get that validation from people she can't control and manipulate.
And props to May for seeing what Azula wasn't seeing, which is like, it wasn't about the trainer.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, that's not, and saying it, right? Like, that's not about the trainer.
Yeah.
Like, she is seeing the things that are actually happening in front of her, and we love that.
Mm-hmm.
What other moments do we see of seeking?
I mean, there's a ton. Are you kidding? Like, let's go to Katara, all right? Katara,
Yeah.
right in the beginning. What we see is there's a jump in this episode from Katara having some waterbending ability to now being able to invent new abilities.
Yep.
And, extrapolate from other bending disciplines and say, oh, I saw an earthbender do this, and so I thought I'd try it.
Try it with ice, and it worked.
Aang's like, wow, that's amazing. And she's like, yeah, I guess the next thing is I have to get a teacher in the Northern Water Tribe. And because that's where they're heading, right?
Yep.
And so she is setting her sights on, I've gotten as far as I think I can get on my own, therefore I need to seek a new way of learning. And so there's this element of how, what part of ambition is intrinsically connected to seeking, right? Because it feels like when is enough versus when do you need to find an external source in order to continue growing in the way that you want to grow. And I don't know. I mean, that's a tough line for different folks.
Just trying to find that moment in yourself is a really tough thing to do, of like recognizing I've made it as far as I can go without somebody.
Yeah.
And now that takes a lot of humility. That takes a lot of awareness. That's a tough thing to do.
Yeah.
I've kind of peaked at this place, and so now I need to move to the next. Especially when that place is comfortable. Especially when that place feels good enough sometimes.
Well, and the opposite is an interesting feeling too. Like, so I, studied music in my undergrad career, and I play the piano. I took piano lessons for a long time, and it got to the point where I was not practicing at the rate I needed to be practicing in order for the lessons to be worth it, like to be worth the money, literally. And it was one of those things where I knew that if I wasn't able to invest more time on my end, that continuing to seek guidance from another wasn't going to be helpful. And so there's a line of knowing, like, okay, I need to do more personal work here, versus the opposite, which is what we see in this episode of I've done all the personal work that I can, and I need to get help from someone. And there's a lot of I think it's tough to be on both ends of that spectrum, right? Where it's tough to be like, I can't get further. Someone else can't help me in this moment. I have to seek this on my own. And then the opposite, which is, again, with Katara, of I know that I need help and I need to ask for it. So I think both of those are challenging.
Yeah. That level of humility and understanding, especially when, that progression could open up some things, right? Like we see this in Sokka and Katara and the warning from Wang Shitong about you may find something you don't like.
The truth.
Yeah, and they had to really deal with mom
Yeah.
sacrificed herself for me.
Yeah.
Dad did not look at me as a warrior or as capable,
Yeah.
at all. Those are hard things to like rumble with,
Yeah.
but also talk about if you're able to rumble with it and spend time with that, how powerful that awareness can be as well.
Yeah.
Right. The gratitude that can come from that, the navigating of all the emotions that are going to play with those things can really be something that can be detrimental depending on how you handle it, or can be really uplifting is probably not the right word, but gives you a skill set to move forward in life as you continue to know those things. And so it's an interesting dynamic to say, when you're seeking for the truth, are you ready for the truth?
Yeah.
And that doesn't mean the truth has to be this harsh thing the way that it may be in the show.
Yeah.
But, the best leaders and learners are people who are looking for honesty. I was teaching a class recently, and what good leadership is.
Yeah.
85% of people, based off of a Gallup survey, say they want honest feedback.
Yeah.
They're not looking for you to sugarcoat. They're not looking for you to lie to them and tell them they're doing amazing. They just want honest feedback.
Yep.
Now, they don't want you to be a jerk about it, but
Yeah.
people want to know, am I not showing up as well as I could be in this space?
I want to know.
So it's an interesting thing to deal with, do we want the truth? And what do we do with it when we find it?
Well, and, this is a Brené quote, but feedback is a function of respect.
Absolutely.
Right? And so when there is mutual respect, there is going to be a feedback loop where I feel willing to give you feedback and I am willing to accept feedback from you. Right? And so how do we create a dynamic where it is not only is it safe to provide feedback, but welcomed? And I think that is something that requires us to seek it, right? We have to be willing to seek it, but also we have to be willing to provide it and be really willing to sit in the discomfort when it comes, right? Because it's one thing to say, I want honest feedback. It's another to get it and then immediately not listen to it.
Get defensive and attack on the other side.
And it's hard. Believe me, I get defensive too. I am not perfect at this, but I do think that,
I'm great at it.
I think you are better at it than me, legitimately. But yeah, anyway, I think that it is interesting to think about how, feedback and seeking are tied together, right? That's an interesting loop. I digress. So, we've talked about Katara. We've talked about Sokka.
Yeah.
We've talked about Azula and Zuko. Let's talk about Aang.
Let's talk about Aang.
So we fly over this burning forest and we go to this village, and Aang's like, I'm guilty.
It's my fault.
It's my fault. I'm the problem. It's me. Hi, I'm the problem. It's me. And
is that Olivia Rodrigo?
oh my God, how dare you? you, the Swifties are going to rage against you. Anyway, so Aang is seeking because of that guilt. So what we see is guilt is a motivator for him seeking out a solution. And, he's like, okay, not only am I going to pretend to be confident here, I'm going to go be confident and go do this thing that I have no experience with at all.
Yep.
And I'm curious about that, right? Does guilt make us do things that are outside of our skill set? But also, he is the only one that's equipped. He just hasn't had the teachers he was meant to have that were going to normally guide him in this kind of thing.
Sure. I mean, and it causes issues, right? What's reckless searching look like?
Yeah.
And I think that's part of it. Intent, we talk about, matters in certain spaces, right? Impact absolutely matters. Intent can also matter, and sometimes that the intent can be a good lens of how we move forward. And so if the intent is coming from this place of shame, I have to do this because I'm bad.
Yeah.
And so I'm going to do this thing, and I'm not going to think of consequences of it. Then yeah, maybe that's not the thing to do in the moment. Maybe the reason you are searching is not a good reason.
Yeah.
I ultimately, I think Aang is kind of saying, like, I don't know what I'm looking for, but I'm looking for something. That's also a really tough place to be.
Yeah.
I think of...
But there's a lot of trust there. He says, I'll know it when I find it.
Yeah. And maybe that's true, right? I think of people who are looking for their purpose.
Yeah.
They're in a job they don't like. They're trying to figure out their next move. I don't know what it is, but I want it to be something that's different. And sometimes that's enough of a catalyst to kind of make a good move. I do think, anytime we're searching for something, you've got to be, one, prepared for the truth that you're going to find, but also recognize, like, how are we searching, and is that causing harm to others?
Yeah. I mean, and the realization that you might not find.
And you might not find it.
What you're
Or you'll
looking
find
for.
something completely different.
Yeah. And just, again, that kind of openness to, like, oh, maybe this is an even better outcome than you expected.
I do think you kind of pair that with Zuko, who knows exactly what he's looking for, what he thinks he was looking for. But his reluctance to take help, right?
Yeah.
Especially from someone that he doesn't view
mercenaries.
As enough.
How can you trust them?
And, Iroh comes up and he says, we need help.
Yeah.
Who's going to be... This is the best person to find it. Let's do it. Let's use them.
Her literal job.
Yep. And so... But I can think of so many times where I am searching for help, or I'm searching for the right answer, but I want to be the one that comes up with it.
Yeah.
I want to be the one who solves the puzzle in the escape room. I want to be the one who does that.
There's a little bit of ego in that,
There's a little bit of ego, a little bit of pride, and just this, I want to do it because I need to do it. And the reality is...
No, you don't.
We don't do this alone. You need help. We all need help, and that is what it is. And so...
Well, it's not always, like, sure, you might be able to do it on your own.
Yeah.
Right? It's just going to take you a lot more energy, effort, and time than it would if you did ask for help. And sometimes the cost of that energy, effort, and time is too great for you to not ask for help unless you're willing to pay that consequence.
Yeah.
And that's what Zuko's grappling with, is realizing that he will be able to find the Avatar on his own, but he won't be able to do it in the way that he wants to, right? Because it's going to be too late. Zhao's going to get it. Everybody knows about the Avatar. The Avatar is going to get trained too much. Time is a factor in this. And so if you want to do it faster, humble yourself and ask for some help.
So I'm hearing a few different themes, a few different trends that are takeaways for this as we talk about how does this apply to
gimme
leadership. One, how do you open yourself to the results that you may not be searching for, but still may have benefit moving forward?
Yeah.
Two, accepting help sometimes to allow us to find what we are needing in that moment in time.
Yeah.
And three, be ready to hear what you're finding, regardless of, what the outcome of that is.
Mm-hmm.
So, which are all it's all very vague and philosophical and not very tangible. But at the same time,
but it's also true. They're all truisms.
I think the biggest practice is how do you identify, hey, this isn't what I'm looking for? And it's a perfect analogy for watching the show.
Yeah. That's what I was thinking.
How do I find, I'm looking for maybe this and I'm not getting that, but does that mean what is in front of me also isn't valuable?
Correct.
The answer still may be no.
Yeah.
Right, but how do you open yourself up that opportunity?
Right? And just because it's not valuable to you doesn't mean it's not a valuable thing.
That also reminds me of just relationships in general.
Yeah.
Right? I want a partner.
Yeah.
For whatever reason. And this partner needs to have A, B, C, D, E, and F.
It does not make you any less of a person because I don't want to be with you.
Yeah.
It just means that I don't want to be with you.
Yeah, correct. And so sometimes it's if they don't have some of those things can be full-on deal breakers. And that's
for sure.
That's fine. You get to set those boundaries as an individual. And I'm here for it. And then some of those things are I really wanted someone who likes scary movies. all right, is that the hill you're going to die on
Yeah.
in terms of like what could be a quality relationship?
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that kind of lends itself to that idea of I need this relationship. I think this relationship should look a very specific way.
Yeah.
And when
they
it
need
doesn't,
to like this type of book, they need to listen to this type of music,
Yep.
and they need to be willing to go with me to every concert I want to go to. And if they don't, then I just can't date them.
yeah, which generally was me for like the entirety of my early 20s. And I think that that's a real thing for people. And so how do you
Yeah.
open yourself up to like what could be really meaningful relationships that just maybe look a little different than what you were initially searching for?
Yeah. Well, and I think it's fine to have those kind of expectations.
There are again, there are boundaries that I think should be like, this isn't. I'm not searching for this. This is a must-have from the get-go.
Yeah. And if that's, going to live concerts for you, that's okay.
Yeah.
Right?
I'm thinking more along the lines of like they're not going to use dehumanizing language towards me,
but
right? Like those are boundaries.
And yeah, those that yes, like 100%. And something that seems trivial to you and I,
100%.
like concerts, and might not be so trivial to someone else.
That's right.
That might be a true deal breaker.
No, I like going to a concert every week, and
Yeah,
if you're not
and
willing to join me on that, then like
Yeah, then
we're not going to hang out.
then we're not going to work,
Yeah.
right? And so but I think that's part of it, and what I really appreciate about some people who are better at this than me, which people who set clear, like, this is the way that I am, and this is not something I'm willing to change, and I want to tell you up front, right? If you're willing to accept that, then absolutely let's hang out.
And that
If
might
you're-
change a year from now or 6 months from now.
It might change, but this is me currently.
Yep.
And that's just the way things are.
So how do we, when we're searching for that type of line, how do we keep ourselves in check on like, no, maybe I do need to change that? Because there's definitely an element of that, right?
That's so hard.
Because there's an element of like, this is I want to be in a relationship, but 80% of my time is not up for grabs, right? Like, and I'm not willing to change that. Okay, then being in a relationship might be difficult, right? Like that's a part that could be there. And so searching for what can ebb and flow and change, and where do I need to be more flexible, but what are the true deal breakers that I'm not willing to change because it's a core aspect of like who I am and what I believe.
Well, it's an interesting thing because I'm kind of reminded of this trial that Sokka had to go through, of this rite of passage, and thinking about like, what's the purpose of this rite of passage?
Yeah.
Is it to like signify that Sokka has made it to manhood, and does passing this test really mean something? Or like, is this like his boat license to be able to go out alone? Or is this a rite of passage that is a ritual in which when somebody, interferes like Bato does at the last minute, they say all the right things in the ceremony, right? Of like, yeah, it's about who you choose to go with you. It's about like all of those things are like, yeah,
that makes so much sense. Yeah.
And then to hear on the back end that like, oh no, this was a test to see if you were like ready to like, what is the purpose of it? And so clarity of purpose is something that requires inner work. It requires cultivation of awareness that we always talk about. It just requires this inner sense of what you're looking for. And again, I think that is honed every time you get feedback, right? And provide and receive feedback. And I think that's part of that is shaped by openness to improve and to grow.
Yeah.
That's my initial thought.
So that lens of I'm searching to be the best version of myself may help guide what boundaries and things you're willing to be flexible with.
So.
And move.
Well, and I think recognizing that people change too is like saying, hey, this is something that right now, this is the phase of life that I'm in, and I know that I might change that. And at the time, this is not something I'm willing to compromise on. And so it's one of those things where like, it's okay that you don't want to compromise, and when you do want to compromise, you're gonna, right? Something's gonna come along that you might be like, no, I can't compromise on this, but you're gonna come into something that makes you're going to want to.
Right.
And then that's when you have to make the discernment and
Yep.
decide what's more important to you.
Yeah.
And you might find that the other thing is more important, and that's okay too.
Yep.
You're allowed to change. So I think it's let yourself be, and then when you receive feedback that gives, and using your body as feedback, using how does it feel in your body,
Yep.
telling you, oh, this doesn't feel good anymore. Oh, that's a fact, right? That is a piece of data that I can use to make this decision.
Yep.
Right? So emotions, turns out, helpful.
Is there anything else you want to lift up from this episode before we jump to our break?
Speaking of emotions, let's talk about Heibai. So this fox comes along and is like, oh my god, Heibai's in pain.
UA?
You do things when you're in pain that you don't want to do.
Yeah.
Turns out, when you're in pain, sometimes what you're looking for can be thwarted by your pain.
Mm-hmm.
Like what you're looking for, sometimes when I'm in pain, I lash out instead of ask for what I need. And turns out, if I just asked for what I needed, I'd probably be in less pain. But
Yeah, hey, but just let people know to not stop knocking down your forest.
turns out, that might be helpful.
We don't
But
know.
it also might not be because...
But also, like, you can only look for what you know that you need. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
like, that's
exactly.
If you don't know that tool or have that tool set, that's a tough thing to navigate.
Which is why having grace for people who are in pain might be a, generous thing to consider.
Yeah.
But I thought that was a neat little tribute to thinking about how, pain and emotions can dictate what and how we seek. So, yeah, I mean, we've touched on most everything else. Ko's looking for food. Ozai's trying to pit Azula and Zuko together against each other. We got, what is Gyatso seeking? Why is it just this one more meeting with Aang just to be like, hey, buddy, I missed you?
Yeah, that's the thing that I'm not sure that I have a good understanding of at this point. We get more information about that next episode as well, and I don't know the purpose
Yeah.
of Gyatso being there at this time.
Was it Gyatso's choice? It
I'm
sounds
searching
like
for the answer on that, and I don't have one yet.
it. Makes you feel dissatisfied.
No, inquisitive,
Curious.
curious.
Well,
We'll see.
we'll see. Or not. But that is probably going to bring us to the end of our discussion.
We'll see what we have to say after this break.
I see what you did there. Can you believe that we are back to talk about our final couple of segments? We got one of our cool segments, we got one of our water segments, and we got one of our grateful segments. But what we're going to do is our cool segment first, which is Twee and La. We talk about balance, talk about things we like, things we don't like, things that pull us in, things that push us away. It's all about balance. Sunshine,
Yeah.
where do you want to start?
I liked Heibai. I thought Heibai looked great.
Terrifying.
Yeah. Exactly what I think Heibai should look like. And they played
how it was drawn.
played it really well. Like,
Yeah.
that was one of the best things. Like, and then, like, you look at Appa, and I don't think that Appa's drawn very well. Or, like, computer generated
To be
very well.
fair, I think Heibai looks, because it is not a normal looking thing. It
You
is
think a
more
flying bison
suited.
with 6 legs is a normal looking thing?
I think a bison is a normal looking thing, and a big bison is just a big bison, and so it's just one of those things where, like, I think it is better suited to CGI than Appa is.
That's probably true.
Right. So,
But that looks
yeah,
great.
I agree. I thought Heibai was interesting. I was terrified.
I
Scary.
love the moment where Zuko goes into the bar
Uh-huh.
and you hear all these town members be like, "Oh yeah, the
Avatar."
canyon guide
Yeah.
saw him," And oh yeah, they helped stop the volcano at that one place. And
Yep.
so like, it's a good way to drop those episodes. I'm still kind of bummed because I love those episodes, and we don't get those.
Yeah.
And it's different. I'd still to this moment, I think one of my biggest gripes is they continue to try to bring in fan servicey things.
Yep.
And make you want to appreciate things because of your familiarity with the source material, and then also want you to forget the source material
To allow for the
changes that they're making.
Yeah.
And I don't think you get to do both. I don't think you get to harp on trying to create this deep emotional connection with Gyatso that, like, they want you to have that understanding of what happened in the original show and why that relationship means so much. But in terms of this show, it really means nothing.
Yeah.
Like, it's not, you haven't spent enough time there for it to really feel like there's a good reason, like, for that to be such a meaningful moment. Like,
Yeah.
I can understand for Aang, I can make the jump and leap in, like,
This is a big deal
understanding.
for Aang,
I
yeah.
understand that, like, Aang did it and why Aang feels like that's a really powerful moment for him. But I don't feel that as an audience member because I don't care about that character.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I think that's where I'm at with that. Same like Wang Shitan leaving the library. Awesome. One of my gripes about Wang Shitan as a character isn't that it's a bad character, but like he obtains all this knowledge and doesn't share it.
Yeah.
And now he's sharing it.
Yeah.
Which is like, oh, thanks, bud.
Yeah.
But I also don't know if bringing Wang Shitan made sense.
Yeah.
You
All
know?
right.
So like that's the type of stuff where.
Yeah, we got some Twee and some Law.
And Ko is one of my favorite moments in the original series,
Yeah,
and so this
yeah.
is where it's really tough for me to like draw the line between adaptation.
Yeah.
Ko is terrifying, and a villain through and through in
For
the original
sure.
series.
Oh yeah.
And so like he wasn't scary. That baboon moment in the cartoon makes me jump every time, and like this one was just. Felt like fangless, you know what I mean? Like it was toothless and didn't have the weight to it. Looked good, like the look of
Yeah.
Ko looked good, but I was not scared of Ko.
Yeah.
And I still want
I think
a Karuk horror series where
yeah.
he fights dark spirits.
I think for me the thing that pushed me away was Ko also, just because I like you have some attachment to the way Ko was done originally, and to see it taken differently and to be incorporated with the Fog of Lost Souls in a way that like there's just some things where I'm like, I don't know that we needed to make that change to get the thing that you wanted to do across. So I like there's a little bit what feels to be like needless weaving of like elements of the franchise that don't need to be woven to make a point, and it just seems excessive, I guess.
Again, like when there's moments where they walk into the bar and it feels organic, and you're like, oh yeah, we heard that the
Those were
Avatar
good.
stopped in
I
Avatar.
agree.
It's
I
like
think those are great
stopped walking in,
choices.
you're like, oh, that felt fun. Like
Yeah.
that's a wink at
I
the
agree.
show when you just drop all these characters and things from 8 seasons or 7 seasons of Avatar and Korra, and just like plop them down and be like, we're gonna drop the Fog of Lost Souls here.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So those are my pushes away. I agree with you in terms of like I love the Easter eggs. I think that like dropping in the one-liners, brilliant. Sokka's one-liners I think are smart. I think the bar I think is great. I also really like the Fox interaction. I think that Sokka and
That's
this-
UA, right?
Yeah,
like we
that's
all
supposedly,
recognize it's
right?
got the little
Yeah.
manacle.
Yeah. So I think that was a neat. I don't know that I needed it to be UA, but I do think that that's a really neat interaction.
Yeah, I like that. That was a new thing.
Yeah.
That I was like, that is cool to
Yeah.
have a spirit who's like not totally against
Yep.
people
So,
being there.
I thought that was cool, and I also really like. I think it makes more sense to me to have Azula be really striving for perfection, and also not as perfect as she is in the original. Whereas she is just like unreal in terms of her capacity as a 14-year-old in the original. And I think what we're seeing is a little bit of her flaws and how they're being created by Ozai, which I think is a realistic adaptation of how she is, why she is.
I do as well. I'm interested to feel how much that would feel in contrast as well if she was perfect.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
That's fair.
Like if he was still doing those things when she was doing everything perfectly. But to your point, she feels more like a 14-year-old.
Yes.
In this, where she felt like a 25-year-old.
She's smarter than me.
And
like she's yeah. Yeah.
And then my other final push away, and it's happening more and more, is I'm going to say it every episode because it reminds me of it every episode. The emotional beats with Aang do not hit as hard because there's never as much joy as there was. Part of the reasons that Aang finding Monkey Otso hit so hard is because leading up to that,
he was like, we're going to play.
He was a 12-year-old penguin sledding.
Yeah.
And so the difference between, like, this joy and whimsy that has to then come, like, face-to-face with genocide versus this kid who just mopes all the time when he feels like... When you see a 12-year-old who, like, loves themselves and then feels like they're not enough, there's a real sharp contrast that makes it go, that hits.
Yeah.
Because we see that, like... He's just in the perpetual state of it's my fault
doom
all
and
the
gloom.
time and doom and gloom. And so coming up with more doom and gloom does not, I feel numb to it.
Yeah. I mean, that's an interesting point. Yes. Okay.
Devotion.
Yeah, we're transitioning away from our Tui and La, and we're jumping into our intention, knowing that we can watch this episode and watch this series and still learn from our discussion on it and proceed with trying to improve ourselves.
Yeah.
And so with that, we are seeking to set an intention with the lens of seeking and the element of water. So with that in mind, one of the things that I came up with was how if you put water and in anything, really, and there is a crack or there is a way out, the water will find it. And it's just going to take the easiest path forward to keep on moving and stay in motion.
Yep.
And I realized that that's not always what, I want to do. Sometimes the easiest path forward
it's not the right
is
path.
not the right path.
No.
But I also recognize that it is very easy for me to stay on the easy path just because that is where I'm being led or taken. And so what I've been trying to think about is, and this is part of the thing that I went, like, when I graduated from school, my professor was like, you should really pursue graduate school. You would be really good in this. You could make it if you wanted to. But I also had a full-time job that was going to pay me when I graduated from school. And I was like, this is really nice. And I could get paid. And it's kind of like the easy choice.
Mm-hmm.
And so I did it. I don't necessarily regret it. But I also, part of me is like, I could have gone to grad school like 10 years sooner.
Yeah.
And so it's like, what would my life have been like if I didn't choose that?
Yeah.
And so it's not a regret thing, but it's more of a, how do I really think about why I'm doing what I'm doing moving forward, especially as I begin to start applying for full-time jobs again.
Yeah.
Like, it may be easier to take this job or to accept a job that I don't really want, but, does what it should. Or do I wait and hold out for a job that is really aligned with what I'm looking for? Like, there's just a lot of discernment coming up.
Which
soon.
is so really tough because, again, it goes, what are you searching for and what's the intent behind it? Because I know that the way that you got to approach grad school, because of the 5 years in between, is probably a very different version of you. and probably probably for the better, right? Like I am more equipped to go to grad school now than I was at the age of 22 in terms of like how ready I would be for the coursework and the level of attention I'd be able to put towards it. And so it's like, how do we recognize, like, oh, I'm probably more empathetic because I did this other job for 5 years.
Exactly.
Which makes me better at social work, therapy, all that fun stuff. But also you go, but did I lose 5 years of time?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because I was doing this other thing. It's a really tough
It
thing to rumble with.
It is.
Thank you for sharing.
You're welcome. How about you? What's your situation?
I'm going to some national parks here in the next few weeks, which is going to be fun.
I love those.
But it made me start thinking about like access to water when you're on those hikes and you're looking for clean water.
Yeah.
But like you may not always find that. And so then it becomes, how do I filter it? And so that's what my kind of intention is how am I filtering the information around me that maybe it's not exactly what I was looking for in the moment, but can it be beneficial? Or how do I filter it to something that is beneficial? And that's the other part.
It's interesting to think about, like, in your normal daily life, you have access to filtered water that you don't ever need to filter because it's just done for you. And then having to have the burden of having to do it on your own changes the game.
Yep.
Right? And that's true of this kind of filtering that you're talking about too, is sometimes like you just don't need to worry about it. And then other times you do. And so thinking about needing and using the skills, even when you recognize that other people are doing it, like having gratitude when that filtering has been done for you. It's just like there's a whole lot there. It's neat.
So yeah, that's my thought. Speaking of gratitude.
Speaking of gratitude.
This has been the first time I've liked Wang Shitong.
Yeah, really?
I mean, here's what I'll say. I think Wang Shitong is a great character.
For sure.
In the original series.
Yeah.
As a, like, if he was real and would I hang out with him? No. And I think there's a lot to be said for gathering information and doing nothing with it.
Yeah.
There's a lot to be said about inaction when you have the means to act, especially in times of crisis.
For sure.
And so here's a moment where Wang Shitong is actually helpful.
Yeah.
Giving, like, warnings.
Here's some
advice. He wasn't overly mean about it. He wasn't, like, warm, but, like...
They don't understand me.
Yes.
Only you do.
Correct. But, like, I was like, oh, that was a cool deal. Thanks, Owl. Like, and so, like, yeah, for the first time in, like, 9 seasons of this show, I'm going to give Wang Shitong some gratitude.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting, too, because, like, you have some spirits that you can understand and some that you can't, and some that only the Avatar can understand and some that don't. So there's some discrepancy there, but I digress. I'm grateful for Bato. I thought this moment, like, the original is offering Bato, like, it doesn't actually do anything. It's Aang, Katara, and Sokka, and in this version... Bato's on this ship and is part of his crew who's running this rite of passage and steps in, helps Sokka, and then defends Sokka. Like, not when Sokka is listening, but, like, when he's, he is eavesdropping, but not when he doesn't realize Sokka's there. And I think that this moment is a really beautiful moment. I think Bato genuinely cares for Sokka. I think that he recognizes that his... Sokka's father is a bit rigid here. I thought that was a really good use of Bato in this adaptation. And I just appreciated the character move. I thought that was admirable in the way he handled it.
Well, there we go.
Yeah.
1 episode down, 3 more to go.
Yeah. Tell us how you're feeling about NATLA. Give us your thoughts. We don't want to taint yours just by giving our impressions, but that is why you're listening, is to hear us talk about it. So thank you for continuing to do so.
Yeah.
And if you're curious, we still do live episodes. I do still live episodes. And we have a group of people that show up. And if you're interested, check out our Patreon. Thank you for being here. And this has been another episode of Bending Not Breaking. Until next time,
I'm Sunshine.
And I'm Ben.
Thank you for listening.
Bye.